Let's get some lights on. It's a new year, for goodness sakes. Happy New Year to all of you. Happy 2020 all around the world. Isn't that the neatest thing about a new year? Is it doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter where you hang your hat. It doesn't matter where you play or where you work. Everybody at some point is going to be saying it's a new year. It's a new opportunity. And why don't we start this new year with a machine that has never, ever, ever been featured on this channel before? And if you've been watching things on Facebook, you already know probably what machine I'm talking about. This is none other than a Husqvarna Viking 51E, and it belongs to my friend Tom, who comes from the southern part of Wisconsin, down around the Madison area, where he lives with his family, his wife and his two beautiful little girls. And those two beautiful little girls are the ones that a couple months back, you might remember, I had painstakingly prepared two Swedish beauties for those little girls. And Tom was going to present them to them right around Christmas time, which I hear he did. And in our recent conversation, he said, "Scott, I owe you some pictures of the girls enjoying your masterful work in readying those Swedish beauties for them, because they are having a ball playing with their sewing machines and learning with their sewing machines and creating with their sewing machines." But now it's Tom's turn. Tom took care of his little girls, got them two beautiful Swedish beauties, as you probably remember, and now this is his go-to machine that's going to be set up eventually probably in a table, and it's going to take care of all of his sewing needs for the most part. And you've never seen this machine on this channel before. And Tom had noted that when he brought it to me. He said, "Scott, I don't think you've ever shown a Husqvarna Viking 51E on your YouTube channel before. With all the hundreds of videos that you have, I don't think there's a single video of this machine." He's absolutely right, until now. For this premiere! Ha ha! And this is a really unique machine. Obviously, it's a flatbed machine. It doesn't have a free arm, but it's got a lot of the other bells and whistles that we are accustomed to seeing on the Husqvarna Viking green machines. And His Majesty is just beaming back there, because this is the first time that this particular model has been shown on this YouTube channel. As we are quickly approaching 7,000 subscribers, 1.5 million unique views, and the list goes on. We have so much to be grateful for. I have so much to be grateful for as we continue to grow this channel with our friends around the world that share our passion of vintage sewing machines, like this one right here, this Husqvarna Viking 51E. And it's actually technically a Type 51E. And there is a brother to this machine as well, a Type 51A, as in Apple. The only difference being that that 51A is going to have a lever for the stitch length control instead of this knob, and it's going to have a different tension control. It's going to have a tension control more consistent with what you would see on the 21As and some of the other Type 21s. It's much smaller, like a button style upper tension controller. And this machine has some other nuances as well, which I should probably point out before we jump into things. Number one, you're going to see that unlike the other green machines that hide that drive belt inside the housing of the machine, this 51E proudly displays that belt on the outside. So you can see it's belt driven. it's going to have a motor on the back, which interestingly, when we look at the photographs, you're going to see is not made in Sweden. I'll make you wait. If you haven't checked out the Facebook shots yet, and I haven't presented them obviously during this premiere yet, then you're just going to have to wait a little bit to find out where is that motor made if it's not made in Sweden. And you're going to notice as well on the side here, we've got what looks like, could that be a way to release the clutch? No. No, that's just part of the balance wheel. That little green portion of the balance wheel in the center is not going to allow you to release the clutch. It's not going to allow you to disengage that clutch so we can wind a bobbin. And we're also going to have to wind a bobbin in a unique way once we figure out how to get a bobbin to seat on this machine. I'll show you what I'm talking about shortly. So what is this little doodad down here? It looks like it's got a straight stitch type design on it. It's got a zigzag or a stretch design on it. What the heck does that little thing do? It doesn't do anything other than drop the feed dogs. It's going to allow you to drop the feed dogs so you can do freehand embroidery, so you can do other things that are not going to require the pull of those feed dogs. And then right over here we've got a tensioner that we're going to be using in conjunction with winding a bobbin when we go ahead to do that. Right above here we've got our stitch width controller. Right now you can see we have it set on 0, and then we've got this little tab release right here on top that's going to be used only when we're looking at doing buttonhole functions, which we're not going to be doing during this premiere. But that's what that little metal tab thing is right there on top, is to allow you to access the stop and start points of the different buttonhole making functions of this 51E. And you can see we've got a range on stitch width of anywhere from 0 to 4, and we're also going to be using that stitch width when we're accessing the cams in order to transition from one cam setting to another. And I'll try to demonstrate that during this premiere, just to remind you that that's the easiest way to be able to move that little silver controller right there to access the cam functions. Right here above the stitch width controller, we've got a couple of things. We've got stitch length control, which we got a huge range on this thing. Anywhere from, on the top range, 4 all the way down to 0.5. So we're going to be able to really use that stitch length range significantly when we're working with those cam generated stitches, and when we're working with other functions where we really want to fine tune that stitch length output. And obviously right in the center we have a reverse button that we can push in order to basically back tack. We can use it to lock off stitches when we're done sewing a seam to make sure that they don't come undone. We can do a variety of different things with that that reverse button. And that reverse button was a sick puppy when I got this 51E on the workbench, as I shared with Tom, and he was aware of it. It was in a mess. I had to do quite a bit of work on it, had to do some disassembly, and she's a happy girl now. Now just to the right of that, we've got a weird, funky little button, some sort of thingy. This is going to be where we attach that bobbin when we want to wind a bobbin. And it's also, when we push it in, it's going to disengage that clutch so that we're not going to have that needle moving while we're winding that bobbin. And this is as good of a time as any to talk about a challenge that I encountered. And I'm going to leave the camera exactly where it is right now and then show you a couple other things. So you might be able to see in this shot, and I'm going to come in even a little bit closer. Whenever you're putting a bobbin on a machine to wind it, doesn't matter if it's a Husqvarna Viking, it doesn't matter if it is a, I'm going to put a little bit of music on in the background here. So whenever we're wanting to wind a bobbin, we've got to mount that bobbin to the machine in some way so we can wind it, right? So there are a variety of different bobbins that are out there when it comes to the Swedish beauties. I'm going to turn my screen around here. These are a sample of, and I'm going to have to come out on this shot a little bit. Let's see here. There we go. That's still pretty good, I think. Okay. So when you're trying to wind a bobbin, you got to mount the bobbin on there some way so that it is in a fixed position, right? I got to change this music. I played this once before in a premiere, and it's almost like nails going down a chalkboard or something, isn't it? Ah! So here's a sample of 4 different bobbins that are being marketed right now or being utilized in some way with the Husqvarna Viking green machines. We've got a variety of different ones. We have the one on the far side here, right here, that almost looks like it's kind of a chrome type style one. And this will work with the machine, but it will not work when you're trying to get it to seat on there and to mount on this 51E, because there's there's basically a pin. You may be able to see it right there, the top of that pin. It's on the top and the bottom, and when you try to slide this on, there's nothing to hold that bobbin in place. So even if we engage it by pushing it in, you know, we're gonna get a mess. See, it spins, but the bobbin won't seat on there. There's nothing to hold it in place. There's nothing to snap it in there. So this bobbin will not work. Here's our second bobbin that we have as an option, and this one is being sold wide and far right now on eBay and other venues. It almost looks like a Class 66 bobbin, but it's not. It's not rounded on the top or on the bottom. It's flat like it should be for a Husqvarna Viking bobbin, but all it has is that single hole on this side and no hole on the other side. So again, with the pin style on this 51E, as you can see in the shot, you put it on and there's no way to get it to seat into place. So when we push the foot controller, it just falls right off. So we've got this other style right here, and this is the one that Tom sent with this machine, and this has a little groove, but that groove will only seat on one side. It won't seat on the other side. It has to seat on both sides simultaneously in order to stay. So when we put it on there, we try to get it to lock in place so we can wind a bobbin. Got some plastic on there, that's interesting. Give me a second here. So when we try to put it on there and get it to seat in some way, like the other bobbins, it just falls right off. And this is the last option we have right here. This bobbin, it's flat on both ends like it's supposed to be for the Husqvarna Viking green machines, but it has nothing as far as a mounting point on it where those pins will slide in. So again, like the other ones, it just falls right off. So we sometimes, in the absence of having a bobbin solution, we have to be creative. So I'm going to show you what I did with Tom's machine in order to try to make this work. Let's see if we can get a place down here where we can focus. Right above, yeah, we'll go right about there, I think. I think this will work. This should work. I'm going to get a drink of water real quick. I hope all of you are staying healthy in this new year so far. We've had some weird weather occurrences, as you may have noticed from my posts on Facebook. We've had everything from snowstorms to ice storms to rainstorms to flooding in the city of Oconto. So it's been a mess here. It's been quite an interesting winter, to say the least. Okay, so in the shot you can see I have the type of bobbin that Tom sent with this Type 51E. It's got the one little notch on this side, and then it's got the little notch on the other side, but it doesn't work as far as mounting to this 51E, so we can wind a bobbin. Now, Tom obviously has other Swedish beauties, so he could always say, well, no big deal. I'll go ahead and just wind the bobbin on one of the other machines. And you could certainly do that, but isn't it kind of defeating the purpose to have a bobbin winder on a machine if you can't actually use it? That was kind of my outlook on it. So what I decided to do is I decided to create my own notches and use the starting notch that's already on here as a guide point, so I could try to adapt this bobbin so it would work directly with this Type 51E, and also using my special little grinder at the same time to create that notch that's needed. Okay, so let me see if I can show you how I did it, what I did, and then if you have a Type 51E or a Type 51A and you're facing the same dilemma where you're always having to take your bobbins to a different machine to wind them, you can at least consider this as a potential option. Okay, make sure my shot is kind of lined up, and get my grinder going, and we'll create our own bobbin. Actually, you know what I'm going to do first, is I'm going to put on my magnify glasses just so I can see what I'm doing a little bit closer. And that's kind of what I was doing when I initially came up with this adaptation, is using those magnifiers so I could see up and close and really make sure I wasn't grinding too far or too fast in what I was doing. Okay, here we go. You see sparks? You're not losing your mind. There are sparks. And yes, it does get hot a little bit, but it's cool down in the workshop today, so I kind of like it. Okay, and you can see what we basically just did is we expanded the notch on the left just slightly, and then we created a notch on the right. And I'm going to have to check the depth of this. I think I'm about at the right depth in order to get this to seat on there properly, but I'm going to have to give it a quick check. May have to go a little bit deeper than I am right now. Okay, I'm real close, but I would say probably about another millimeter or so, and we'll be good to go. And this will not throw off the balance of this in any way either, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to sand off these edges after I'm done, just to make sure I don't have any rough spots in getting this to seat properly. Okay, I think that's going to get us pretty close, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that it's going to fit on there properly, and then just with a single little finger hold, you're going to be able to wind this puppy up, and it's going to work beautifully. So let me change my shot, and then we'll go back up to that bobbin winder, and I'll show you kind of what we accomplished. And also I better remember I'll sand off those edges just so I don't forget. I'll send that bobbin back with Tom, and I don't want him to experience any weird stuff with it. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit on this. Okay, that's pretty good. Come right over here. There we go. All right, let me flip my screen around. Take off my magnifiers, because otherwise I won't be able to see a thing from a distance. let's see if I can find one more little piece to put on while we're hanging out here. Okay, so this again is going to be our bobbin winder. Again, to engage it when you're going to wind a bobbin, you just push it in like so, and then pull it back out when you're done winding a bobbin. But again, our challenge was these pins as far as seating a bobbin on there. So we adapted this bobbin right here. Where am I? There we are. And we created an extra notch across from the other notch and then widen it slightly. And the reason we did that again is so we could get it to seat over those pins and allow us to engage it like so. And you can see now I'm grabbing that bobbin and I'm trying to turn it, and it's not going to turn because those two notches we created, those pins are inside of those notches now. So now when we engage it, and all I have to do is just keep a simple little finger on it to keep the bobbin from falling off, because while it's snapped in there, we get some velocity, it's still going to have a tendency to try to move. But when I engage it, you can see readily now that we're able to wind that bobbin. And all we did was create that extra notch on the back and widen the other notch so it would fit over the pins that you see, the one on top right now. And then when we turn it, the one that's on the bottom as well. You can see the two pins that run through there that allow us now to fit that bobbin right over those and then engage it in place. And then, you know, again, I'm just going to hold it just so it doesn't spin off on me. And we couldn't accomplish that with these others, even if we held it in place, because there wouldn't be anything to allow those pins to be gripping the bobbin, and all we would get is we would be spinning it and it wouldn't grip it properly. So that's just a suggestion to try if you're facing a similar challenge with your Type 51E or your Type 51A to overcome that issue with the way this bobbin winder is set up with a little pin on the bottom and the top. Okay? And there's other solutions. I mean, I've seen people use rubber bands. I've seen them do other things like that to try to adapt that. And again, as I suggested just in statement, is you'll want to take a fine grit sandpaper similar to this and just clean off this surface right here just to make sure that you don't have any remnants or barbs or anything like that that are going to catch inside of your bobbin case when it's functioning in your machine and create a problem for you. So I just briefly just went over that with a high grit sandpaper, and this will be perfect working in that bobbin case. It'll function exactly right. As a matter of fact, I have one identical to this that I adapted that's in the machine as we speak. Okay, let me wind the shot and let's see if we can jump into a couple of sew-offs with this Type 51E. Let's see here, and I'll put on some appropriate music that is befitting of a Swedish beauty that I've shared on this channel before. Your Highness, Happy New Year, sir. Happy New Year, Dr. Singer. Let's get to work. Okay, the first thing I'm going to sew off is some protected full grain leather. I think we'll go ahead and do 2 layers of it, which is probably about 8 to 12 ounces of leather. All right, here we go. Ooh, I went pretty tight on that stitch. That is a pretty fine stitch. We're probably talking 10 to 12 stitches per inch. Beautiful job through those 2 layers of protected full grain leather. And if we turn it over, we've got the same result on this side as well. I'll try to go back and forth a little bit for you. Green on this light white is not super easy to see, but this machine just did a spectacular job. And I think I'll run down this same material maybe with a zigzag as well. But very pleased with the launch of this machine. It had a number of issues with motor and drive and just how it was laying down its power. No more problems with that, as this machine is a very, very, very happy camper. All right, a little bit of static electricity down here, so I'm trying to get my threads to cooperate. There we go. I think that's pretty good. I'm just going to check my presser foot pressure. We're a little bit light, actually, on the presser foot pressure right now. Give me a second here. I'm going to go ahead and increase that presser foot pressure. I'd done a quick release before on the machine. And I took all the tension out on it. Yeah, I'm still not happy with that. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Okay, let's give that a go again. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go right down this side, and I'm going to go ahead and lengthen that stitch length a little bit. Now that I have the proper presser foot pressure, and we'll see how this Type 51E does when the presser foot pressure is correct. you can't overstate how important presser foot pressure is as you increase the thickness and the heaviness of the grade of the material you're sewing with. It's absolutely essential. It can change and distort stitches. It can affect the feed of the material. It can do all kinds of crazy stuff as you're trying to accomplish the goal of completing that sew off. This is a fun one. This is called Boardroom Theme. It almost sounds like a corporate song, doesn't it? Boardroom Theme. Any of you that have ever worked or are working in corporate America, you can play this song in a meeting and see if it calms the savage beast that you might encounter sometimes in meetings. I've been there, done that. All right, here we go. Again, 2 layers of protected full grain leather. I've made an adjustment to the presser foot pressure, and let's see what outcome we get this time. This will be fun. Here we go. Oh, I love success, don't you? Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm liking this even better. So there's the first one we did on the bottom. The one we just laid down is a top stitch right now. And both of them are just absolutely spot on. But I'm liking the definition of the stitches on top more after making that presser foot pressure adjustment. And if we flip it around, I'm going to kind of go that way first so you can look at the thickness again of what we sewed. And I'll flip her all the way around. And we can look at that, that top row of stitches that we did just now. And then the bottom row is the first sew off we did before I made that presser foot attachment adjustment. Blah, 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 blah. But that's exactly what we're looking for. That's exactly what we're looking for. And I think if you do a rewind on that, I'm also liking the way the material flowed underneath the presser foot and over the feed dogs better the second time after making that presser foot pressure adjustment. And again, your presser foot pressure adjustment is going to be inside of your faceplate on the left side. It's a little dial that you can move, and if you want to increase it as you're sewing heavier materials, you're going to rotate that dial to the rear. If you want to decrease it, if you're dealing with more delicate fabrics, then you're going to rotate that dial to the front, towards you. So away from you to increase, towards you to decrease, okay? So 2 layers of full grain leather is absolutely laughable to this Type 51E. Got it done just like a walk in the park. So what are we going to do next? I think I'd like to go ahead and launch into some of this U.S. Army grade canvas. I've got 2 layers that I'm starting with, and then if I fold it in half, I'm up to 4 layers, which, you know what, that's more than enough to demonstrate the strength of this Swedish beauty, which, by the way, again, does not have a motor that is made in Sweden. I'm not kidding you. It's not made in Sweden, but it's got a lot of grit nonetheless. And if I fold this again, I'm going to go from 4 all the way up to 8 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas. Let's see what that looks like. That is something that I should have made a New Year's resolution not to do again. 8 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas. Are you crazy? Ah! But you know what? We do crazy things on this channel all the time to demonstrate the difference of what a machine in this workshop can do compared to others around the world. And I'm totally cool with that. I'm totally cool with pushing the envelope. So I'm going to see if I can get this puppy in place. Otherwise, I'll show you a cheater's method to do it. Oh yeah, we got this. So there's our 8 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas. We can even wiggle it back and forth as we get it into position. So that's exactly what we want. If we couldn't do that, then we could always release the presser foot pressure inside of the faceplate. As I've shown you before, there's a little tab release that you have to push, and then you'd be able to move this entire presser foot bar up and down to get that thicker material underneath, then re-engage your pressure and then jump into your sew off. But we don't have to do it even with 8 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas. It just says, what's the big deal? No big deal at all. All right, let me see if I can find another piece of music to put on here. All right, I've got one called Victoria. Let me try Victoria, see what that sounds like. Yeah, it's not real peppy, but it's got, it's got a little momentum building in it, I think, doesn't it? Okay, so 8 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas, and I am probably, because this is a belt-driven machine, I am probably going to give it just a soft hand start to get that momentum going, and then let this machine take it over. All right, are you ready? Here we go, 8 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas! Wow, I don't think I had to help it much, if at all. Oh, good gravy, that's fun, isn't it? All right, so 8 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas. There's our top stitch right there. Need I say anything more? That is exactly what we're looking for, folks. The stitch formation, the stitch spacing, the stitch integrity, it just doesn't get any better than that. That's exactly what we want, exactly what we want. And as I turn it over, there's no difference with that lock stitch. The spacing, the formation of that lock stitch is exactly what we're looking for when we're laying down not just a heavy duty sew off, but when we're laying down a stitch that we can describe as near perfect. Look at from the side, folks. Try that on your machine and send me a note, and then send me your machine so I can fix it. Oh, success is sweet, isn't it, folks? Beautiful stitching, beautiful stitching. Oh yeah. All right, I'm going to toss that to the side. So, what I want to show you next is something that might surprise you a little bit about this Type 51E. And that is that it also has a way cool decorative output as well. And it takes exactly the same type of cam in the back that you'll find on the other green machines, the black cam that I've shown you before in other videos. And you'll be able to see that in some of the Facebook shots we'll look at as we wrap this premiere up. But I'm going to go ahead and grab some of this. It's almost like a curtain type material. It's got kind of a rubbery back to it, which right away tells you it really is going to try to mess around when it comes to the integrity of any stitch that we lay down on it, because it does have that tendency to act like a nylon type material in trying to manipulate the integrity of that stitch. But we're going to try to hold it accountable, and we're going to try to lay down some stitches that I think are real brag worthy. And right now in the back of this Type 51 Echo 51E, I believe we have cam. Well, before I say, let me take a look. So right now it looks like we have cam C in the back of this machine. Again, it's taking the same black cam that you're accustomed to seeing in the other green machines, with the exception obviously of the 19E, the 19 Special, that has the cams engineered in the machine already. You don't need any cam with that particular model of the Swedish Beauty. Okay, so let's launch into some of these decorative ones. I'm going to see if I can throw on a little bit more music for us. Again, that last one I played for you was Victoria. What else do we have here? Oh, this is intriguing. Beneath the Moonlight. Let's see what this one's like. Although I think that's going to be a little bit slokey pokey. Let's do this one. Bike sharing to paradise. Bike sharing to paradise, and it says it's bright. So let's try this bright one for some decorative sewing. The first one we're going to sew, and I'm going to come out on my shot a little bit so you can see me making these adjustments on the machine, and then we'll zoom in on the stitching. But again, when you're changing between cam settings using that little slider right there, you're going to want to zero your stitch width between transitions. So I'm going to come right out about to here so you can kind of see what I'm doing as I go through these various sew-offs. I think you can see that's a pretty good shot. All right, and I'm going to take another drink of water too at the same time. So I'm curious if any of you have made any really unique or unusual New Year's resolutions, you'll have to either type it in the chat or post it with this premiere announcement on Facebook. Let me know what your resolutions are. I'd be curious to know. I know about all the traditional ones. People want to do more exercise or lose weight or gain weight or eat different foods. Something unique, something different that you've elected to really set as a resolution for 2020. That's what I'd be curious to know. All right, we're going to start with stitch, excuse me, number 5 on the cam settings, which again, the Swedish Beauties come with a built-in zigzag on every cam. All of these black cams, one of the 5 stitches on that cam is going to be a zigzag, and it's always, in my experience, going to be in position 5. So that's what we're going to do first, is a standard zigzag. And I'm going to leave, let me see here. I think I'm going to leave it pretty big. I'm going to change the stitch length to 3. And then I got the stitch width on 4 for this first decorative sew off that's off of cam C, position 5. Here we go. I think I just broke my thread. What the heck? I did just break my thread. Well, gumdrops. Oh well, we can fix that, right? Okay. So we will rethread this 51E. I did something wonky that it didn't like. I'll probably just start off with a new one. Alright, let's see what we got going on here. It's pulling through there beautifully. Sometimes the thread just breaks, folks. This is the thread that I got from Joann Fabrics, and that's not a throw them underneath the bus type thing, but I'm fairly new at using this American quilting thread. And I've generally had some real good outcomes with it, but you just never know when you're using a new type of thread as to whether or not it's going to do something funky. So let's go ahead and thread this back up again. Got to cut off my end, it's a little bit frayed. There we got her. Okay. So let me pull this thread out on this initial one that we just did. Either that or, you know what, I'll just cut it off, because we don't need that much space for 5 stitches anyway. So let me cut that. And this will be take 2 of doing some cam output generated stitches, which hopefully don't go south this time, doggone it. All right, make sure my thread isn't caught up in the back or anything weird like that. All right, so again, we're going to start with a zigzag and then we'll transition to some of the other stitch options that are available through cam C. All right, here we go. And I may end up changing this thread out because that silly thread just broke again. Sometimes you can get some bad thread, folks. Sometimes you get some bad thread. Bear with me just for a second here. Actually, that's another thing I hadn't considered, is I normally wouldn't do this, but I was goofing around with some burlap off camera, and I wonder if I may have barbed my needle too. So give me a second here. I'm going to change out my needle, which normally I would not do during a premiere, but in this case I think I will. And it's okay for you to see these little hiccups, because you're probably going to be experiencing them yourself, and that way you know you're not alone. It can happen to anyone, where a machine can all of a sudden start acting up on you, and it might be something that can be solved very, very easily, like in this case. Alright, let's see if we can get that threaded back up again. So I resolved in this new year, apparently, to not allow challenges to derail us during a premiere. But I will, I think I use my magnifiers to thread this. Yeah, I don't know. I'd be curious. Any of you have tried this this type of thread before or not? I've never had any problem with Coates and Clark, but this thread may be deciding to give me a little bit of a challenge. All right. I'm not going to give up on this thread yet, though, because I bought several spools of it, so we will persevere. We will persevere, and I will turn my screen around too so I can see what the heck you guys are seeing. Okay. So we've got her threaded up again, and I swapped out the needle just in case when I was messing around with that burlap I may have created a little bit of a barb or bent that needle a little bit. When you start to experience problems, whether it's thread breaks or whatever it is, you want to eliminate all the most likely culprits when it comes to the thread breaking. Okay? So let's give this a try again. Ugh. Position 5, yep, we're all good to go. So let's see what happens, folks. And that may be a happier machine now. I should say the machine was happy, the needle and or the thread was not horribly happy. So yeah, I'm liking that a lot better. So this is the one that we just sewed off, and that thread broke on us. We switched out the needle. I made a slight adjustment on stitch length, and that's exactly what we want to be seeing as far as that zigzag. We turn it over. It looks equally good, and you can't really see that very well, can you? That's our lock stitch right there, and that's our top stitch. I'll zoom in on these after. Okay, so now that we overcame that little obstacle, now let's go ahead and transition to the next stitch, which is in position 4 on cam C. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that presser foot. And again, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my stitch width, I'm going to 0 it. Obviously make sure that your needle is out of the material when you do that. And then I always grab it on both sides so I can move it more evenly into the next position, which is position 4. I'll go ahead and bring my stitch width back to 4 then, and then I'm going to adjust my stitch length significantly as I go into some of the more decorative style stitches. So I'm going to go down to just above 0.5 on stitch length. And this is again going to be stitch number 4, cam C. Okay, here we go. Check my thread again, make sure it's feeding correctly. All right, here we go. Okay, so that's stitch number 4. Now I'm going to go to stitch number 3, and then we'll zoom in on these so you can take a closer look. I'll do a quick clip on my threads as well. Again, this is pretty tricky stuff. It's kind of a curtain material, and it has kind of a rubberized back on it, so it really does test to see how well that machine is feeding the material when you're using this type of material to sew on, because of that the flex factor of that material. It's not a rigid material to sew on. Okay, so again, we're going to zero our stitch width. Make sure your needle is out of the material. We're now going to move to position 3. We're going to go back to 4. We can leave our stitch length exactly where it's at, just above 0.5. And now we'll see what stitch number 3, or the stitch in position 3 on cam C looks like. Okay, here we go. Yeah, that's my little building block one. I like that. And again, I'll zoom in on these so you can look at them closer. Just try to go through those different cam settings with this wide shot, and then I'll get a lot closer so you can kind of see what we're working with. And also, I will take a little pause and throw some more music on for us. What do we have? Oh, okay. Good for the Soul is the next one. It's classical, and it says that it is inspirational. So we'll be the judge as to whether or not it inspires us, huh? Okay, so what did we just do? We did number 3, position 3. So I'm going to go ahead and zero out our stitch width. I'll go to number 2 now. Yep, number 2. I just want to make sure I'm in the right position. Bring our stitch width back to 4 again. Stitch length can stay exactly where it's at. And we'll get our material in place, and we'll buzz down and do this next decorative stitch option from cam C. Again, we're in position 2 right now. Okay, here we go. Ah, it's our little scallop one. I could even make that shorter, but that's the thing with decorative output stitches. They have recommended settings, and then you have your own preferences. So, I mean, you can get so many different looks and outputs when it comes to a decorative utility type stitch that would be coming off of a cam. So don't feel like you have to follow the recipe exactly. I never do. Okay, so we have one more stitch that we're going to do off of cam C, and it's going to be in position 1. So I'm going to go ahead and drop that presser foot. We'll zero out our stitch width. Again, always make sure your needle is out of the material when you do that. We'll bring our little slider all the way to position 1. Stitch width back to 4. Leave our stitch length alone, exactly where it's at. And we'll do our final stitch off from cam C, position 1. Here we go. Isn't that so beautifully? Beautiful, beautiful running machine now. Not so when it landed on the workbench, but you know what? we're like a hospital here. We never judge a patient because he or she arrives sick. We take them through the process to get them well again so that they can sew at a level like this, where, I mean, you just look at it and go, that's exactly the way that stitch should look. Exactly the way. It's going to do a little bit of fine tuning as far as clipping threads here. Okay. Now I gotta find the tails on this end too. Like pin the tail on donkey. Why do they always pick on donkeys on those games? You ever wonder about that? And those of you in other parts of the world may have no idea what I'm talking about by the game Pin the Tail on the Donkey, but it's a childhood game that many of us played at one point. Okay, blah, 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 blah. All right, let me do this now. Clip one more thread there. And we'll see what we have so far. Actually, I'll do it like that so you can see the grain a little bit better. Got enough room in the harp space. Actually, I can put all three of them there. I don't have to put the one on the outside. Okay. So again, this Type 51E, we just did a variety of different sew-offs. We kind of started over in this neck of the woods with this protected full grain leather. You can see we did 2 layers of it. You can see right away looking at the nap of that leather, there's nothing lightweight about this stuff. And again, remember we did the first row where I really wasn't happy with the presser foot pressure setting. And so I made an adjustment, and as we go down you can see readily with the stitch integrity that it laid down on that protected full grain leather, and especially the second row. The one that's on the right, I believe. Yeah, the one on the right is the second one I did. I really like the look of those stitches even better with that presser foot pressure adjustment that I made. We move over to this one. These are the decorative ones that we just did. The one on the far, where do we start? The one on the far left is a standard zigzag that we kind of laid down. And that's when my thread broke. And then I changed out the needle, made a little bit of an adjustment on it. We laid down that second row of the zigzag to perfection. So again, if you run into an obstacle, if you have a hiccup when you're sewing, it's okay. You just have to overcome it and then jump in and get the job done. And that's position 4, that next row right there next to the zigzag that we laid down. Position 3, I kind of refer to it as a building block style stitch. Position 2, kind of an elongated scallop style stitch. And then finally position 1, which is just kind of a wonky decorative stitch. I don't know how to describe that. It's kind of a combination of a scallop and a variety of other stitches all together. It's kind of cool. So, but that again is a picture right there of success. We ran into that little obstacle on the far left, and then we jumped into it and laid down stitch after stitch after stitch after stitch through from position 5 all the way down to 1, and absolutely as it should be. And prior to that, we, as you remember, we had gone after the U.S. Army grade canvas, 8 layers of it, and again, look at it from the side and look at the quality of this stitch that we laid down. You know, if I resolve to do anything in this new year, it's do even better at what I do, if that's possible. Maybe it's by sometimes having a little hiccup during a premiere and then overcoming that obstacle, then jumping back in and delivering perfection as we did in this premiere. But that's exactly what we want to see. And again, that's through 8 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas. And I can certainly go ahead and flip these over as well and show you the lock stitch side of these. We'll start with this one right here. We'll go to this one. I have to kind of tuck that underneath. And then finally this one here. Because again, laying down a top stitch, lots of machines can do that and deliver a pretty decent looking top stitch. But when you get into the lock stitch, you got to really have a machine that is laying it down like it's supposed to be laying it down in order to get an outcome like this. Not a single skip stitch through 8 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas. No stitch variation as far as the integrity of the stitch, the look of the stitch, exactly as it should be. Again, through 8 layers of U.S. Army grade canvas. And then we go over these decorative stitches right here. I'll come out just a little bit so we can look at all of them in totality. And these are all the lock stitches for those decorative ones. We can start on the far side over here by the zigzag that was not to be when the thread broke. And then the zigzag I laid down right after that, after switching out the needle and making a small adjustment. And then we have cam position, what is that? 4. Cam position 3 with a building block. Cam position 2, kind of a scallop elongated. And then position 1 on cam C that we generated, which is, I don't know how you describe that. It's just kind of a fun, kind of a scallop combination of a building block type stitch. It's just kind of like blah. But you could do some fun stuff with that stitch, especially if you mess around with the stitch length and the stitch spacing, etc. And then we've got our 2 layers of protected full grain leather. And we did the 2 different stitch offs where I have made an adjustment to the presser foot pressure. Either one of them, I'm absolutely pleased with them. Again, a little bit harder to see. We have kind of an olive green type thread on that protected full grain leather. But, and I'm in as far as I can go right now, folks, so you can see the stitching. And again, you can't really see from this side per se, but 2 layers of protected full grain leather, 8 to 12 ounces of leather is what we're dealing with. So nothing to hiccup at, nothing to blink at when it comes to you know, just delivering an incredible outcome for this Swedish beauty, this Type 51E. And again, if you have a 51A, you're going to get the similar type of outcome. You're just going to have to adjust your stitch length with a lever instead of a knob, and your upper tension is going to look different. But other than that, the 2 machines are virtually identical. And they're both great machines. So this is the first time I've had a chance to show a Type 51E on this channel. And what we need to do now, let me make sure I'm all set up over here. We need to launch over to Facebook and take a look at some of the progress shots that I took of Tom's machine through the various stages. I'm just going to make sure that this is working before I pan all the way over here. I hope it is. Yeah, it seems to be. Yay! And I'll adjust my screen down a little bit so hopefully I don't get a weird haziness. So this is, and I'm going to have to go over by the computer, obviously, to kind of tap the mouse and go from one position to another. So this is just kind of an opening shot. I wanted to, you can't see it on the other Swedish beauties because it has a motor housing over the top of it, but here you can see that robust motor, which again was not made in Sweden. You can see that robust motor mounted on the rear of this 51E. Just ready to get the job done, especially after I took it apart and cleaned it and did all the various things I needed to do to all of those copper brass type contacts that are inside of there. So really a fantastic motor now, a very happy motor. Okay, so let me do this. Let me see if I can go over here and we'll flip through these shots real quick. So here what I'm showing you, and these are never in sequence, unfortunately, but when I took this foot controller apart for Tom's machine, it had some bare leads and some broken contacts that were not creating a real good ground of power to support that motor. So I basically had to strip them down, rewire them, put new connectors on them, and then seal those connectors, as I always do, to maximize electrical output. Here you can see this before I sealed them, and you can see those nice clean contacts. We've got real good connectivity now to the positive and negative on that foot controller, and we're going to get the full benefit of all that electricity now running through that foot controller to power that motor. So here's when I've added those new contacts. Again, just standard contacts that are going to be able to support the amperage of the motor and give a real nice connectivity so we get the maximum output. Here you can see are the old leads that were kind of varnished, and also on this side, and also I hadn't seen it until I took the screw out, but they were broken on both sides so that we weren't getting a solid contact on that foot control and getting a real good outcome as far as maximizing power. I'll come out a little bit on that shot. Yeah, you can kind of see it now. And here again is the inside of the foot controller. Remember, the foot controller is not just something you stomp on, or in a knee controller case, it's not something you just push with your knee. It's an electronic component. Even if it's not an electronic foot control, even if it's a manual style one like this, but it's got a lot of parts that have to receive attention, have to be serviced, have to be cleaned, have to be devarnished, have to be de-junked, and all that grit and grime and dirt that builds up in there from being on the floor, especially if you have pets and other things like that. It's amazing all the junk that can end up getting collected in there. Again, electricity acts like a magnet, and it's going to pull all that stuff in there and start to degrade the performance of that foot control. That's why when I service a machine, I give as much attention to the foot control as I do to the motor. It's just showing you the outside of the foot controller. Obviously, that is not a traditional Husqvarna Viking foot controller. That's a Mercury style foot controller that was used as a replacement for a number of these machines when the original foot controller was lost or broken or whatever. The rating on this foot controller is more than sufficient as far as supporting the amperage of the motor. This particular Mercury foot controller is rated at 1.2 amps, which is more than enough to support this non-Swedish made motor that you're going to see some shots of, which is rated at about 1.1 amps. So this particular 51E is going to have a motor output similar to a FOF style original motor, about 1.1 amps. And you always want your foot controller to be higher in amperage allowance than the motor. It'll prevent it from overheating or having other performance issues. Okay. Here we're just looking at a side shot of the machine, just kind of getting a glimpse of the body style of it, which is going to be real similar to the other green machines. And here right now, if you were just to look at this single shot, and I have my screen facing the wrong way. If you were to look at this single shot, you would have trouble telling what kind of Husqvarna Viking that is, because again, the look and the design and even the branding on it are going to be real similar to those other green machines. Okay, so here's where the secret finally comes out. I talked about it several times that this motor is not a Swedish motor. It wasn't made in Sweden. Let me zoom in on this in case you didn't already visit Facebook to see it. Where was it made? And by whom was it made? Well, you can see it was manufactured by a company called Sotrick Limited, and they are out of England. And my glasses are really dirty. I'm having trouble seeing the screen. So yeah, Sotrick Limited, and they were out of Middix, or Middle something, whatever, in England. Any of you that are from England and I'm totally screwing it up, send me a note and I'll make it right. So here we've got a Swedish machine with an English motor, which is no big surprise, because remember, we had other makers as well that were US based that also made some of the motors for the Husqvarna company as well. So, but again, I think their vetting process was so rigid that this motor, if I were to do a comparison of power against a traditional, say a 21E that has a 1 amp motor, or even maybe some of the 1.5 amp motors, I think that this motor made in England would be able to hold its own, especially after I got done with it. So here we're looking in the rear of the machine through that little cover, and you can see that traditional black cam, the edge of it at least, that I've talked about, that all the other green machines take, right there. So again, the engineering, the output of this 51E, when it comes to the cam function, is going to be identical to the other green machines. Here we're looking at that timing belt, which also acts as a drive belt on the rear of the machine. That's going to be visible in some of the shots that I took of the bottom of the machine as well. Here we're looking at the rear of the machine, the pitman arm that works in concert with the reverse function, and there were a number of adjustments and a repair that had to be done there as well, because Tom's reverse was just not a happy camper. And if you've ever faced challenges before with, you do everything you possibly can think of, all the rotating parts of that reverse, and you're still having issues with the free flow of that button going in and out, which right now I can tell you on Tom's machine, if I zoom over there real quick, right now on Tom's machine, no problem. So, you know, sometimes it's just a matter of getting the right point broken down and lubricated in order to make that machine happy again. And it might require some follow-up too if that thing was really junked up. Oh, I hadn't specifically looked at that, but there's our nomenclature plate right there, Type 51E. And just above it, I'm showing a wider shot of that space in the rear. Again, just showing you that the engineering of the 51E is virtually identical to the other green machines. Kind of a side shot of the motor, and you can see the belt coming off the balance wheel there. I think you can, without the camera facing the wrong way. Kind of a rear shot of the machine. You can just kind of see how the rear, there, now you can see it. The rear of the machine. And here we're looking at different parts of the bottom of the machine, because there are some cleaning points and lubricating points there that are real essential. Here's our hook system, which again is going to have that same jam-free design that the other green machines have, so that this particular shuttle in the middle is going to be able to move vertically and horizontally as it's spinning and doing its thing. It's by design. It's not a problem if you tighten down these 3 screws and you're still getting a jiggly wiggly there. That's absolutely as it should be. Here we're looking at the bottom of the machine. You can see the raceway, the bobbin case here, and then we're looking at part of the interlacing worm gears that are housed inside of here that we're going to be doing some work on. One of our main shafts that feeds in. There's our belt from the bottom that you oftentimes don't see on the other green machines. It's going to have a similar type tooth feed like you see on the we see them on the FOF machines. You see them on a number of the other European style machines, where that that pulley is also going to be interlacing with all of those tooth cleats on the belt to just give you incredible drive and traction as you're delivering the power from that motor. Looking at the faceplate here and making an adjustment on one of the take-up arms. And here you can see the serial number. All the green machines, for the most part, are going to have that serial number stamped right on the inside right side of the faceplate. More distant shot. And just a finishing shot there after the majority of the work is done on Tom's 51E. There you can kind of see a close-up shot of that feed dog drop controller that's going to allow you to do darning and freehand embroidery by just turning that knob. And just another shot, kind of a fun shot there of the little cow peeking through the harp space. And here we've got a shot of that bobbin winding assembly that's going to allow you to disengage and engage the clutch when you're winding bobbins. Another just distant shot of the front of the machine. And another shot. And I think that's full circle. So let me see if I can jump over to these other shots that I hopefully will have ready. And here's where we're going to be doing a little bit more of the deep servicing on the machine. Right here we're just looking at the front of the machine, kind of looking down into the raceway area with that little opening door that I think is real nice and convenient on this model 51E. It's going to have a similar open function like you're going to see on some of the Kenmores that allow you real direct, nice access to grab that bobbin case, pull it out, change out thread, etc. Real nice access portal. Here we've kind of taken off the needle cover and other things, and we're just doing some deep cleaning, and also we're going to be doing some repairs as well as we get into more of these photos. Check the angle of my shot. I know if that's a real good one. Probably isn't. There we go. That's better. And here I've taken out the shuttle hook, and again, it does require a lot of servicing. This is going to be the brain center of your sewing machine, any sewing machine you have, and you really need to get down there and get all of that area cleaned. And then when you're finished getting all of that dirt and grime and all the other stuff out of the nooks and crannies that can catch that thread, you then want to put a light coat of oil. A real light coat of oil on that hook shuttle before you reinsert it. And the Swedish will take issue with that because they say that this doesn't require any lubrication down in the hook area, but I disagree. Here's our retaining plate that that I've shared a number of times through Facebook shots, and the problematic side of it is, and this is after the work has already been done, again they're on a sequence, but when the thread is running through this part of the retaining plate, it tends to basically burrow a hole or holes and create a lot of issues with thread feed. Here you can see this is before. The other shots you just looked at were after the repair was done. Here is before the repair was done, and you can see it's really, really gnarly. Yeah, you can see that real well. Almost looks like someone took a bite out of it, but it was the thread that took a bite out of it as it ran over it thousands, tens of thousands of times, and just burrowed a hole into that plastic. Here I'm starting to repair that area, and I've got my little magnifiers on so I can really see up and close and make sure that I'm not going too far. There you can see it. Make sure I'm not going too far or too deep into that plastic, because that plastic only has so much thickness, and across the top of this part right here, it does not have a metal band of reinforcement like it does on the sides. So if you decide to take on a repair like that, be really careful with the tool you're using and the pressure you're using and everything else. Just like when I showed you in that one video of some of the restorative processes I'm using, where I'm using a Dremel style tool, you got to really harness your power to make sure you don't screw up. Now here again, these are out of sequence. Let me go, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and then go back. So this is one of the most crucial mounting points where that shuttle is going to be running, and you can see Tom's is just really gnarly. It's all the way down to a point where that coating that allows that thread to move freely through that raceway space is gone, and it's real rust. It's real gritty. It's real rough, and it's going to create a lot of problems as far as thread feed and such. Let's see if there's more shots I had going that way. Nope. So what I do then is I mask it off, as you'll see shortly. I mask it off, and then I apply a special Teflon coating back to that surface where that thread is going to be moving behind the shuttle and the hook, so that we've got a nice surface again for that that raceway to do its magic. And there you can see the finished product right there after that coating has been applied and cured, and now it's basically brand new. Actually, the Teflon style coating that I use is actually better, in my opinion, than the original, and will not degrade as you've seen here with Tom's. So here I'm doing some detailed servicing and lubricating down in the raceway area. These again are going to be out of sequence. Let me skip ahead and I'll kind of show you. The only problem with Facebook is they do not, when they upload, they do not upload in the sequential order that you upload them. They kind of upload in a mirror image reversed, which is kind of irritating. Okay, so now I'm going to go backwards because we basically have gone full circle. So down here is below the raceway area. You've got a lot of interlacing worm gears and other critical mechanical pieces just below the bobbin case and the raceway. And this all is an area that has to be serviced. And you'll be able to see when I zoom in, this stuff right here is old, basically petrified oil and grease that's doing absolutely nothing to benefit the machine mechanics any longer. It's basically like hardened, caramelized junk, and we've got to get all of that taken off. As you can see here, it's literally breaking away in chunks, almost like I don't know how to describe it. It's almost like glass, but it has no lubricating benefit at all any longer. There you can see I've used my dental tool to basically spear it and getting all that junk cleaned out of there. Some of it down there on a swab, you can just see how hardened and how old and disgusting it is. So this is our case right here, which on this particular model is actually plastic, and all of that has to be cleaned out as well, so you're not eventually going to be applying new grease and lubricants and have a dirty housing that's just going to recontaminate it right away again. So here we're using detailed cleaning processes to get all that housing nice and clean, get all that old oil and junk cleaned off of there, off of the worm gear areas. And now we're going to be applying brand new grease and lubricant that's going to keep this machine running tip-top for a very, very, very long time. And there you can see we've got it all packed in there exactly as it should be, so that those worm gears and all those interlacing pieces, some of which are metal, some of which are plastic, are going to be able to have the least amount of friction possible to keep it running perfectly. And here you've already seen all that. So that again gives you a visual picture of the difference in the process that I take a machine through that's in the workshop compared to you going to your local technician, your local service area, and having them spend anywhere again from 20 to 45 minutes on the machine and never addressing the issues that I've highlighted through those Facebook pics that we just looked at together. So, you know, again, everyone has to make that decision. Tom has made that decision 3 times. This again is the 3rd machine that I've had the privilege of working on that Tom has entrusted to me to take care of for him. And I really do. I don't take that for granted. I mean, I think I'm the best at what I do, but nonetheless, there's a degree of trust and an investment that has to come into play whenever someone either drops off or ships a machine to this workshop. And I'm very grateful for that trust. And I think I honor that trust. And I've resolved again in this 2020 year that I will not compromise any standards, cut any corners. I'm going to take every machine to the height that it can be taken. I'm going to treat it and try to get it to that level of perfection beyond even where it was when it left the factory back when it was made. And just give an individual a sense of awe about what their machine was doing when they had it versus after it left the workshop and came back to them, and they're like, holy cow, I never realized the machine could do all this. So again, really grateful to all of you for an amazing 2019, and I'm expecting even a better year this year, 2020, as I continue to do what I love, and we share that love of vintage sewing machines together. Blah, blah, blah. And also I should make a shameless mention that just recently, one of my new moderators, Hans Christian from Norway, celebrated a birthday. And I acknowledge that because we're friends on Facebook. But if you want to type in the chat, if Hans happens to be a part of this, or post on Facebook in conjunction with this video and just say, happy belated birthday, Hans. How old are you? And wish him a happy birthday, because it's such a pleasure to have Hans and also have Bill O'Rourke as well as part of the team here. And again, if you have questions, if you have issues, I don't want to discourage you not to send me an email, but send me a note through Facebook so these guys can jump in the mix, because they have access to all the messages that come to me through the Facebook business page for Cow Country Vintage Sewing Machines and Restoration. So send the note there so we can put these guys to work, and they can help you research things, and they can help you answer questions about your machines and give you some great tips and tricks that they've found over the years in helping your machine to do as well as it can possibly do without coming to the workshop, obviously. So, Tom, thanks again for trusting me with this 3rd Swedish Beauty. And don't forget, you owe me pictures of the girls with their Swedish Beauties, okay? All right, God bless you guys.